Welcome. Today we are stepping back into a world of shadows, fire, and whispers from the dust. In the modern era, we often focus on the messages of grace and peace found within the pages of the Bible. But if you peel back the layers of the Old Testament, you encounter a side of the divine that is both awe-inspiring and, frankly, terrifying. We're talking about the great judgments, moments when the window of mercy closed and the earth itself seemed to recoil under the weight of human rebellion. Why does this matter? Because these aren't just stories of destruction. They are snapshots of a cosmic justice that shaped the course of human history. From cities vanishing in sulfur to the earth literally opening its mouth to swallow the rebellious, we are counting down the top 7 most terrifying plagues and catastrophes of the Old Testament. Stay with me until the very end, because the final plague we'll discuss isn't just a historical event. It's a psychological and spiritual mirror that reflects our world today. Let's begin. We begin in the heart of the Egyptian Empire. Imagine the tension. 9 plagues have already leveled the economy. The Nile turned to blood. Locusts stripped the land bare. But Pharaoh's heart remained like granite. Then, the prophet Moses delivers the most chilling ultimatum in history. Exodus 11:4-5 says, "About midnight I will go out into the midst of Egypt, and all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die. From the firstborn of Pharaoh who sits on his throne, even to the firstborn of the female servant who is behind the handmill." This wasn't just a natural disaster. It was surgical. It was a midnight cry that echoed from the palace to the dungeon. For the Egyptians, the firstborn son represented the strength of the household and the future of the lineage. By striking the firstborn, the God of Israel was systematically dismantling the gods of Egypt, specifically Osiris, the supposed giver of life. Archaeological insight. Interestingly, some historians point to the dream stela of Thutmose IV. Thutmose wasn't the original heir to the throne, but he became pharaoh unexpectedly. Some scholars suggest his older brother might have been the very firstborn who perished during this biblical event, shifting the line of succession in a way that aligns with the Exodus narrative. The horror of this plague lies in the unavoidability. Unless the blood of a lamb was marked on the doorposts, death was an absolute certainty. It marks the shift from natural plagues to a direct supernatural confrontation. If you travel to the southern end of the Dead Sea today, you'll find a landscape that looks like the surface of the moon. This is the traditional site of Sodom and Gomorrah. In the book of Genesis, these cities were the epitome of the cry of outcry, a Hebrew term suggesting systemic injustice and moral decay. The Bible describes a scene out of a nightmare. Then the Lord rained brimstone and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. Genesis 19:24. This wasn't just a fire. The text suggests a total atmospheric collapse. Imagine the sky turning into a furnace. Lot's wife, looking back in a moment of hesitation, becomes a pillar of salt. A haunting metaphor for being trapped in the very judgment one is trying to flee. Scientific/archaeological perspective. Recently, archaeologists at the site of Tal el-Hammam discovered evidence of a high-heat airburst event around 1650 BCE. They found melted pottery, bubbled mud bricks, and a layer of ash high in salt and sulfur. The heat was estimated to be over 2,000 degrees Celsius, hotter than a volcano. Whether this was a meteor or a direct divine strike, the physical evidence matches the biblical description of a city wiped off the map in an instant. Many people know about the plagues of Egypt, but few talk about the terrors that happened inside the camp of Israel during the wilderness wanderings. Enter Korah. He was a leader who decided that Moses had too much power. He led a coup, challenging the divine order. The response was not a verbal argument. It was a terrifying display of environmental control. Numbers 16:31-33 records, "The ground under them split apart, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them and their households. They went down alive into the realm of the dead." Imagine standing in a crowd of thousands, and suddenly, the very foundation of your world collapses. There was no time to run. One moment they were shouting for equality, and the next, they were gone, erased by the earth itself. This plague serves as a visceral reminder in the Old Testament that rebellion against the source of life results in being reclaimed by the dust of the earth. As the Israelites wandered, they grew bitter. They grumbled about the food, manna, and the lack of water. In response to this spiritual venom of ingratitude, the Bible says God sent fiery serpents among the people. The term fiery likely refers to the burning sensation of the venom. Numbers 21:6 states, "And they bit the people, and many people of Israel died." The psychological horror of this plague is immense. Imagine trying to sleep in a tent, knowing that beneath the sand, thousands of lethal predators are gliding toward you. It was a plague of constant, high-alert fear. The cure, however, was just as strange as the plague. Moses was told to lift a bronze serpent on a pole. Anyone who looked at it lived. Archaeologists have actually found small copper/bronze serpent artifacts in Midianite tabernacles dating to this period, suggesting that the serpent on a pole was a powerful cultural symbol of healing and judgment in the Sinai Peninsula. At number 3, we return to Egypt for the 9th plague. You might think, it's just darkness. How is that a plague? But read the text carefully. Exodus 10:21 describes it as a darkness which may even be felt. This wasn't just the absence of light. It was a heavy, suffocating, supernatural gloom. For 3 days, no one could see their hand in front of their face. In a world without electricity, light was life. The sun god, Ra, was the supreme deity of Egypt. By blotting out the sun for 72 hours, the god of the Hebrews was effectively killing the lead god of the Egyptian pantheon. The psychological impact of tangible darkness is profound. It represents a return to the void and formless state of pre-creation. It was a warning that without the divine word, the world reverts to chaos. We move forward in time to the era of the kings. The Assyrian Empire was the superpower of the ancient world, brutal, efficient, and undefeated. Their king, Sennacherib, had surrounded Jerusalem with 185,000 elite soldiers. He mocked the God of Israel, claiming no deity could save the city. Hezekiah, the king of Judah, prayed. The answer came not through a battle, but through a silent, invisible strike. 2 Kings 19:35 records, "And it came to pass that night that the angel of the Lord went out and smote in the camp of the Assyrians 185,000. And when they arose early in the morning, behold, they were all dead corpses." 185,000 men in one night. No swords drawn, no arrows fired. Just silence. The archaeological smoking gun. The Taylor prism An ancient Assyrian clay cylinder found in the ruins of Nineveh records Sennacherib's campaign. Curiously, while he brags about trapping Hezekiah like a bird in a cage, he never claims to have captured Jerusalem. For a king who bragged about every victory, his silence on the fall of Jerusalem is deafening. It confirms that something catastrophic happened to his army that forced a humiliating retreat. We have reached the ultimate catastrophe, the one that reset the clock of humanity. The Great Flood. Whether you view this as a global event or a massive regional cataclysm, the biblical description is the peak of Old Testament terror. It wasn't just rain. Genesis 7:11 says, "All the fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened." This was a decreation. The waters from above and the waters from below, which God had separated in Genesis chapter 1, were allowed to collapse back together. The horror here is the finality. An entire world, with all its art, architecture, and populations, was submerged. Cultural evidence. Every major ancient civilization, the Sumerians, Epic of Gilgamesh, the Greeks, the Maya, and the Hindus, all have a great flood myth. Why? Because the memory of a world-ending water disaster is hardwired into the human psyche. It remains the ultimate example of what happens when the patience of heaven finally runs out. We've traveled through fire, darkness, serpents, and floods. It's easy to look at these 7 events and see only a God of wrath. But as a student of these texts for many years, I've come to see a different perspective. You see, in the biblical worldview, these plagues were never the first choice. In every single one of these 7 stories, there was a long period of warning. Noah preached for 120 years before the rain fell. Moses gave Pharaoh 10 chances to change his mind. The prophets warned Jerusalem for centuries. The lesson I take away from these top 7 tai hua is not one of fear, but of consequence. We live in a world that often feels like it has no boundaries, where we think we can exploit the earth, each other, and our own spirits without a bill ever coming due. These ancient stories serve as a speed bump for the human soul. They remind us that the universe is built on a moral foundation. But here is the beautiful twist. In the Protestant tradition, we believe that the ultimate plague, the ultimate weight of all this justice, was eventually taken by someone else. In the New Testament, the darkness of the 9th plague returned for 3 hours while Jesus was on the cross. The wrath of the flood was poured out on him so it wouldn't have to be poured out on us. So, when we look at the ruins of Sodom or the silent camps of the Assyrians, we shouldn't just shudder. We should be moved to live lives of gratitude, justice, and humility. Because the same God who is powerful enough to shake the earth is the same God who, according to these very texts, wants to give you peace. Thank you for watching this journey into the ancient past. If this gave you a new perspective on history and faith, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment about which event you found most shocking, and I'll see you in the next deep dive. Stay curious and stay grounded.